figure out how to. If you say you can edit, then hey, I can't do. I don't know why.
This is not your first rodeo, right?
Not with this. It isn't. Okay. I used to have like a show for about a year.
No kidding.
Yeah, over in the Twitter building.
Oh right.
Yeah. It was I would interview, like, it was like a panel discussion. I'd interview like CEOs and stuff like that.
No kidding.
Yeah. For like emerging technology. And I would say explain it like you're talking to an 8-year-old, because I was the 8-year-old. I knew nothing about the subject.
All right.
So I'd ask these really rude questions, but they'd have really interesting answers.
Nice.
Yeah.
And this lasted for a year.
Well, yeah, about 10 months. It fell apart because we couldn't figure out how to make money. We didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know what I was doing.
Couldn't you ask the people you were interviewing?
Just to give me money.
How to make it?
Well,
they
had all these everyone had ideas. Nothing happened, and it was, there were other complicating factors.
Anyway.
Yeah. So okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for sitting down to join me today. I've been looking forward to this. So I guess really, what I would the inspiration to sit down and do this with you was that in all the artwork of yours that I've seen, and even just all the really imaginative gifts that you've given us, and thank you for those over the last several months. I forget exactly when it was that we met, but you have such a very recognizable sort of signature style of artwork, to the point where I'll be walking around and I'll see something and I'll say, this reminds me of Alex.
Well, I'm honored to hear that, number one. I like the fact that I can be recognized by my style. One thing I've always believed in is the style should be distinctive. I really shouldn't look like another artist, because I have my individual voice that I want to be heard. And it's primarily an idea of being very visually stark and almost in your face with the imagery. The idea behind that is that I want you to look at something as if you're seeing it for the first time, and what impact it has upon you. And if it makes you laugh, I'm really happy, because you're going to find something there that touches your heart or touches your soul, and you're going to relate to it. So this is great to hear that things that you find in everyday life can resemble something I've done. That's very inspiring for me to continue. I also wanted to mention that sometimes there are artistic blocks, as you have writer blocks. I have not ever experienced one.
Really?
In 60 years of working as an artist.
That's a hell of a thing.
I just have not. And I hope I'm not jinxing myself by saying that, but I really feel that there's so much creativity within my system that I could produce art for easily a couple hundred years.
So let me ask you a question about that, because I think one of the ideas of this channel, and one of the reasons why I was really happy to be able to start it with you, is the idea that it's one thing to talk to somebody, let's say, who's been doing art or music or writing or whatever it is for 10 or 15 years, and they're at some kind of peak career moment. But it's something else to talk to somebody who's been doing it, like you said, for 60 years. And that's just, if you look at the time span and the pitfalls, and I think the wealth of advice from somebody who's been doing it for a lifetime just is really instructive. So when you talk about you've never had a block and you just had so much creative energy in you, when did you realize that about yourself? And was there any kind of moment that you sort of discovered this wellspring of it? And why do you think it is that you've never run into an obstacle creatively?
Well, let me start with high school. High school was when I realized the talent. And a good friend of mine at the time said, why don't you make your signature caricatures of some of our teachers? Because I was drawing friends. And so I started to draw some of our teachers who were religious brothers, Christian brothers. And I did about 10 of them. And then I showed them to this friend, as well as some of the brothers. And the consensus was, these look more like the people than the people themselves. So I thought then, I'm onto something. And that idea of trying to duplicate or replicate a person or a landscape or a seascape really stuck with me. that started my process as an artist. And then let me jump ahead, if I might, because 60 years is a big span.
Sure.
And I think there are pivotal points. The next pivotal point was in college, where I met one of the finest art teachers I've ever known, a Russian man who has since passed on. He himself was an artist, and he taught painting. And so he said, I want you to work on a larger scale, Alex. Most of your paintings tend to be small and intimate. He says, I've got a canvas here that is 6 by 10, 6 feet by 10 feet. So it's a pretty substantial canvas to work on.
And pardon me, the size of the canvases before that, on average,
in other words,
how would you compare them?
Sure, anything from an 8 by 10 to 11 by 14, always within the realm of something that I could easily place on a desk or a kitchen table. At that time, I didn't have a full studio. So it's something that would allow me the portability and the opportunity to work in small spaces. And then I started expanding to a 2 foot by 3 foot canvas. And that gave me more of an opportunity to show images in a larger scale. So this teacher, his name was Conrad, he said, Alex, I want you to work on this big canvas that I'm providing for you, and I want you to paint the Taj Mahal. So I did that, and a woman in the class named Louise, who was still my friend, she is 73 years old.
Wow.
At that time was 20, and she said to me, I like that painting of your Taj Mahal, can we go out? True story. And as I say, we're still friends. And it's amazing the power of art, how it can move someone. And that's certainly an example. Again, indicators that maybe I'm on the right track.
So those are moments of encouragement.
Encouragement.
Yeah. So, but and the first one was in high school. Can you tell me when you first started using art, and if there was just how much there was there in terms of encouragement by your immediate family, and if they were involved in making art in some way themselves?
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. My sister, who's 5 years younger, she's 71, is a very good artist as well. She tends to be more interested in replicating reality as best she can. She's very good at that and has done some fine work. But when we were youngsters, we didn't really recognize each other's talent. It didn't really occur to us that we might be artists someday. So it was kind of a private thing. She had art instruction, I had art instruction, but we never really, it's interesting to me looking back that it was never a time for us to compare and contrast our individual styles. Even now, our work is distinctly different. Mine doesn't look like hers doesn't look like mine. Both art styles are very good, I think. She has exhibited and has done shows, as I have. We have never actually brought our talents together. And perhaps we will. There's still a chance for that. But the idea of being supported at home it was not happening. And I think it was no fault of anyone. It was simply a lack of awareness on the parents' part about art per se. My father was very interested in opera, and so we got an early introduction to opera music at a young age. And my mother was very involved in the family business, her father's business, and so she was involved in accounting and marketing products. So art was not a part of our realm. I think my sister and I just found it on our own.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then in high school, for me, with that encouragement of doing caricatures, it got to the point where I thought, well, geez, if I can do these, maybe I can try other forms. And so I started to do pen and ink representations of buildings and scenery and landscapes. And I like that very much. So each time I delved into a new realm of art, I found myself much more involved and excited about the newness of it. Over at Fort Mason, City College, until recently, had a campus so that you could attend art classes there. And I got involved with them and spent 17 years working on monoprints, etchings, and the whole printmaking style. And I still have a good body of work with that.
So how did that come to pass that you came to be involved with that?
Oh, okay.
Because that's something that you sort of breezed past, but I think that's, I mean, it's not at all obvious to me how somebody would just sort of find themselves there doing that kind of work.
Good point, good point. I used to attend Fort Mason art classes that were involved with things like pottery. And I thought, well, this is interesting, but it doesn't do much for me. Even though I was getting proficient at it, I thought, no, I've got to find something that resembles what I can do. So I found the art department, the general department, and eventually found my way into printmaking, because printmaking allows you to make one of your images into an edition. So, for example, if you like my rose, I can produce 20 of those that are all very, very similar on a printing press process with printing ink, not with paint.
I see.
And again, I sometime would be happy to show you some of those. So that path was very comfortable. And as I say, I stayed for 17 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, a long time. And then the policies changed, things changed at the school. And so I said, well, again, it's time to move on. And that's when I found that I wanted to revert back to my own studio. So I built a little studio at home and started to do solo work, no longer involved with other artists. And I did that, let's see, now we're coming to a point in my life that is another critical point. The critical point was I developed a cancer in 1980, which was pretty serious. It was a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was treated with surgery and then radiation and big doses of chemotherapy.
Wow.
And I was strong at that time. I was about 35 years old, and weightlifting had another 30 pounds on me. And so the doctor said, well, let's proceed with this therapy aggressively. So thank God they did, and thank God I endured it. But during that time, and this is really a critical part of my development, I would sit in the hospital bed, and I had a bunch of marking pens and colored pencils and pastels, and I started to draw abstract. And I hadn't really done so much abstract work before. Very expressionistic and very live paintings. And one of my oncologists saw them, and he said, "Oh," he says, "are you drawing your cancer?" I said, "Yeah, that's what it is." I said, "This is the cancer, and this is the solution." So I found that in my work, I was producing a healing process for me as an artist.
And it naturally took a more sort of abstractly expressionist
Right,
kind of form. And from what you said earlier, I'm inclined to think that it had been more this sort of a higher, more attention to realism. I think you talk about caricature art.
Yes. And here I went into a whole different phase of things that would resemble actual microscopic pictures of cells, of cancer cells and diseased membranes and unusual shapes, geometric shapes of cells that were not normal. And at the time, it was sort of an unconscious thing. And then I began to see, yes, indeed, this was my healing path.
It's a very interesting thing for someone to decide to do, and just to sort of find yourself already in the act of doing it. Like the guy said, that are you doing this? And you said it wasn't deliberate. How do you sort of account for that? Or I mean, tell me more about that. Because when I hear you say that, what I think is, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, just what's going through someone's mind when they've been given a diagnosis like this, and I think how terrifying it must be just for how many unknowns there are. This thing is invisible, lives in your body, and you can't see it like you can see a broken arm healing or something like that. Was it a way of making the unknown known and approachable and relatable, and something you could almost sort of master by rendering it artistically?
I think what you're saying is absolutely true, except I didn't really fully comprehend it until maybe a year later, when I was in remission and felt relieved. Got the medical testing to show that I was cancer-free, and I took a fresh look at the art. And a very famous art curator for the Young Museum took a look at it, because I was trying to reach this man to show him work, and he said, "This is fabulous. This is really fabulous." He says, "I'd like you to continue in this vein, and I'd like to see you in a year." Unfortunately, a year later, he was no longer in that position where he could actually purchase for the permanent collection of the young. So there have been a few glitches along the path with museums.
Timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm sort of upset about that, because I really feel that I should be there. And I would like to do it while I'm on the planet, so to speak.
I would like that very much too.
Yeah, I really would.
In terms of that work, and I mean the abstractly expressionistic work compared to the stuff that you've done before, how would you compare the sort of the emotional import of it? Because that's the first time I've heard you talk about a specific experience causing you, not an object you're trying to render, but an experience in your own life that's caused a change in how you approach it. It wasn't just sort of, but when you went to Fort Mason, I think what I gather is that it was almost a when in Rome situation of, because this is available and you're not really connecting with pottery so much, you're looking for something else and you sort of found printmaking.
Sure.
But this sort of seems like you weren't choosing from a menu. This seems like it just sort of came unsought from within yourself, would you say?
Yes, exactly. And now that you mention it, I have to go back in history, in my personal history, to graduating from high school. I maybe have made a big mistake. I'm not sure even now, but I want to say it's a possibility, because the California Art Institute, just 2 blocks from my home, was an opportunity. I could have decided to get a bachelor's degree in art instead of pursuing English and liberal arts, and perhaps I wasn't savvy enough to see the importance of it, but people like Clifford Steele, Elmer Bischoff, Joan Brown, Jan DeFeo, Nathan Oliveira, were all there. The biggest names in American art were teaching there, and I would have been 18, 19 years old with these people. And so, what is it? Hindsight is...
Hindsight is 2020.
2020.
But that number's been besmirched, if you can imagine.
Sure. So, but anyway, that attempt to go to Fort Mason was a way of maybe offsetting that disappointment.
I see.
And I probably was saying something like, "Okay, Alex, you didn't do that opportunity, but there may be others. There are some pretty good printmakers in the school, and in fact, I did have good success there."
17 years, you said, was it?
Yeah. And one of the things that would happen is it was a situation where you would attend a class and you could have access to these wonderful presses that you could normally not own. They were $20,000, $30,000 presses. And so we had that opportunity, and most of the artists who stayed there seriously for years like I did came to think of this school not as a school but as a personal studio.
I can see that, yeah.
So they'd come in the morning and maybe stay a whole day. Teachers would say, "Okay, leave him alone." That person would not have to do the required studies and tests or anything. They would already be on their way. They'd get a standard grade, and they could just use it as a private student.
So much more open and flexible.
Yeah.
And much more adaptive to the reality of where a student would be.
Right.
In the assessment of the faculty. Is that?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I consider myself what they call an outlaw artist.
Hmm.
I didn't go through the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps because I didn't, I have an individual voice that is very distinctive.
If I can flatter myself, I think we have that in common.
Yeah,
You know?
sure.
But
sure.
in terms of, it makes me wonder if you had gone to, tell me again the name of the school.
Oh yeah, the Art Institute.
Art Institute, yeah, but if
not
you
the
have-
Academy of Art. That's another
Right.
good school, but it's commercially oriented. The Art Institute, which unfortunately I believe is forced to close because of pandemic and financial burdens, but there's still a hope that a benefactor may come to the rescue. It's a fine school. If you haven't been there, 800 Chestnut,
Oh, yeah.
and it has this Moorish turret and
I
wonderful-
have been, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
lovely, yeah.
And in fact, it's haunted. There's tales about it.
Well, no, I will have more questions about that.